What is going on, you lot? This is Monish. You're watching CineShades, and today we will talk about frame rates. ठंडा मांगा था. Hi guys, if you are new here, we make cinematic videos, travel videos and filmmaking related videos. Today I'm going to start a new series called Tips Weekend, where every weekend I will be putting tips that will help you make cinematic videos. So as I said, today's topic is about frame rates. Now, frame rates are a base to every video. Now, if you don't know what frame rate, FPS or frames per second is, it's basically how many frames or how many individual pictures your camera captures in 1 second to make a full video. Now, unlike video games, which are like higher the frame rate, the better it is, it's not the case in filmmaking. You have to shoot at the frame rate that looks most natural to the eyes, and the most cinematic frame rate that has been proven by many cinematographers is 24 frames per second. Now, often many people ask me what should be the frame rate setting in your Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro timeline. Now, it should always be 24 frames per second if you're going for a cinematic look. Then there are other frame rates like 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. These are used for slow motion. Basically, what you do is you shoot at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, and then you bring that footage into a 24 frames per second timeline, and then you can slow it down to get that smooth slow motion. Now, there's one more thing that goes hand in hand with the frame rate is the shutter speed. Basically, a cinematic video will have the right amount of motion blur. If you don't know what motion blur is, try doing your hand like this and you will see that it's blurred out. So in natural circumstances, we can see a certain amount of motion blur, and to make the cinematic footages more realistic, you have to get the right amount of motion blur in it, and that is controlled by the shutter speed. So basically there's a 180 degree shutter rule, and in the simplest way, the 180 degree shutter rule is whatever your frame rate is, your shutter speed should be double of that. Now, for example, if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1 by 1/48th of a second. If you're shooting at 60 frames per second for slow motion, your shutter speed should be 1 by 1/20th of a second, and so on. Now, sometimes it might happen like you're shooting on 24 frames per second, but your camera has no option of 1 by 1/48th of a second. So you have to choose the nearest shutter speed that's available, and for most cameras it will be 1 by 50th of a second. Guys, that was the Tips Weekend episode 1. I am up for suggestions for the next week's Tips Weekend, so make sure to comment down below with the hashtag Tips Weekend. Also, you can tweet on Twitter with the hashtag Tips Weekend or DM me on Instagram. Do hit that subscribe button below, and I will see you guys in my next video.